Welcome to the Feminist Wellbeing Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Dozier, non-diet nutritionist, certified intuitive eating counselor, and cognitive behavior coach. And I've earned myself a PhD in diet culture. And at the age of 40, after graduating from a 25-year dieting career, I said no more. And I'm here today to guide you on how to feel damn good by reshaping your mind instead of your body. And this podcast episode is going to be a public service announcement on the danger of healthism and why there is more to life than good health. That's a big statement, isn't it? I know this statement is probably triggering some people. I know it triggered me when I heard it for the first time years ago. But we need to have this conversation, my sister. We need to talk about healthism. I'm going to unpack it, what it is, what it means, the history around it, how does it show up in your life, and what is the problem with healthism, and why. Once you understand healthism, I think it's going to be very easy for you to understand why there is more to life than good health. And I'm going to use a personal example because I can give consent to that, a personal example of how I had to make choices in my life with regards to how I was going to pursue healing certain health condition that I thought I had to, and it would actually make me enjoy my life less. And by the way, I am very strategically placing this episode in the month of January because it is the biggest month of the year for many of us to want to get, quote, back on track with our health, and where alphism actually causes problem in our own life. We just don't know how to name it. So I strategically am releasing this because it's January and many of us are on the health bandwagon. Okay, what is healthism? Healthism is a term that was coined by Robert Crawford in 1980. So it's fairly recent. It was a term that he created in a article that he published in the International Journal of Health Services. And he stated this: the preoccupation with personal health as a primary and often the primary focus for the definition and achievement of well-being, a goal which is to be attained primarily through lifestyle modification. Crawford was a writer on political and health topic, and he observed this phenomenon where people in the 1980s were beginning to think of health as a personal responsibility. So healthism is like any other ism. It is like racism, ageism, by which we define people's status in the social scale through their health status. We, in a way, we can flip that around and say we oppress people, we judge people's worth based on their health status and or their health behavior or the effort, the dedication, the investment they make in becoming healthier. So the underpinning principle of healthism is that health is an individual responsibility, therefore an individual decision, and that striving for better health is a obligation. Now, this podcast is not about saying, oh, health is not important. Health, you don't have to do anything for your health. And I know Some people listening to this are like, oh my God, this chick is saying that health is not important and we don't have to do anything for our health. And I want you, if this is what you're receiving, it's what you're feeling in you, I want you to notice that. I'm going to become the coach now and point out to you the cognitive distortion of black and white thinking. If you have listened to the prior episode, 420, on the weight neutral approach, the paradigm shift of the weight neutral health approach, this is probably the same reaction you're having to the concept of weight neutral health. And that tells us when people go in a cognitive distortion of black and white thinking, not just with health, with anything in life, it's a sign of insecurity. It's a sign of fear. It's a sign of discomfort. It's a sign of feeling threatened. And that's what happened to me years ago when I was introduced to this term, healthism. And the reason why personally I reacted so strongly is that I dedicated 25 years of my free time, of so much of my energy and my money, trying to become healthier and trying to prove to the world that I was trying hard to be healthier. So to be told that health is not a moral obligation, that the pursuit of health is a personal choice, that I have the choice to pursue health or not, was highly threatening to my self worth, to my self image. Hemp that up with, if you are listening to this and you are a health professional, where not only the concept of healthism is threatening your personal investment in your health, but it's in your entire professional career that is at risk. When I teach about healthism in the non-diet coaching certification, the level of people being triggered is like 10x because people perceive me teaching about healthism as health being an individual choice, not an obligation, as a threat to their livelihood. So I want to recognize all of that. And I want to recognize that it's totally normal for you to feel trigger, either personally or professionally, with the topic of healthism. It's a hard pill to swallow when you've dedicated so much of your life to perform health in order to achieve a status in society. Okay. But that being said, let's go back to healthism and how this plays out in your life. Just a quick reminder, healthism is so healthism makes health a moral obligation and judges people's worth or social status in society based on their health status or their effort, their dedication, their investment towards better health. So, how does this play out in your day to day life? When we think about improving our health, it often will start with a simple health behavior like having breakfast in the morning, like carving time out in our busy life, an example, to eat some type of breakfast in the morning. And over repetition, over noticing the positive improvements that having breakfast in the morning have on our life, it gradually becomes a habit. It gradually becomes a habit that is ingrained into some kind of a routine, which feels great. The issue becomes when this habit, this routine lacks flexibility. When for whatever reason, something happened one morning, you can't have breakfast, and then later on in the morning, you start feeling guilty because you didn't have breakfast. Or perhaps you're invited to have breakfast in a restaurant, in a specific restaurant that doesn't serve the kind of food you're having for breakfast, and you rather not eat the food in the restaurant because it's not the normal food you're having at home. And now you feel guilty for not eating with your friends. Or if you do eat, you feel shame for eating not the quote unquote right food, where the flexibility of the habit goes away and it becomes tied into performance, tied into how you feel about yourself. And then all kinds of emotion get tangled into that health behavior like guilt or shame. Orthorexia, which is an actual health diagnosis, is a perfect example of that, where the desire to eat healthy turns into the disorder of eating perfectly. I could also give you an example related to movement where you begin with wanting to move your body and make it really simple, and it's going for a walk, right? And then it becomes tracking your time you're going for a walk, and it's tracking your speed, and it's tracking the elevation of it. And every time you're layering in complication, and if you start not performing the walking speed, trend, elevation, you become dissatisfied with yourself. And if you miss a walk, you are becoming self-critical and judgmental. That's how healthism plays in your day-to-day life, where actually the habit that was supposed to help you feel better becomes counterproductive because of the guilt and the shame and the anxiety around the health behavior, where these emotion and this mental contorting has negative impact on your health. So healthism, and as I'm starting to talk about that, I'm sure you're starting to look at people around you. You perhaps are reflecting on influencer you are following, or books you are reading, or notion you've been taught about health, and makes you realize how there's an ideal of health being proposed in our society, right? There's a not only an ideal way of eating, which most of us on this podcast are aware, but there's an ideal way of sleeping. Now people are tracking their sleep and how they're sleeping and their recovery, and people are tracking their water intake and supplement intake and type of exercise, and people are comparing, and there's right way and wrong way to do it. It leads to this ideal performance of health, just like the ideal performance of eating, the ideal performance of body size. And when there's an ideal, there is a superiority and an inferiority. So when you are not able to perform health as it's supposed to be, you feel less than. And the reason why you're not able to perform is probably completely not in your control. Here's an example of this. I follow a gentleman, a fitness instructor who coaches the non-diet approach to exercise, and he recently just had a child. He's probably a young man in his early 30s, and his relationship to exercise has completely changed in the last year, because now he's a father and he's building a new home, and his amount of time that is available on his schedule to go to the gym is a lot less than when he was 20, single, and working as a fitness instructor for a living, right? So his capacity is a lot less, but the perception of society is that if he doesn't carve out the time to go to the gym the way he was in his 20s, even though he has a child, no excuse, then he's less than. Does that start to ring some bell in your own life? It leads to perfectionism. It leads to black and white thinking. It leads to I have to. This whole I have to motivator of health behavior is very dangerous. Because when you start studying human behavior and you start understanding intrinsic versus external motivating factor, you realize that this notion of putting health on a pedestal, putting health as a moral obligation has actually counterproductive impact on long-term sustainable health promoting behavior. Because when, as an adult human, we are in a space where we have to, rebellion comes knocking at the door at some point. Like when we don't have autonomy in things as adults, and we rely, or therefore we have to rely on willpower to keep us going, the tracking of that behavior is very short term. Whereby when we engage in the behavior from a place of I choose to, from autonomy, from I want to, I choose to, ultimately I enjoy it, that's when the behavior becomes sustainable for long-term period, if not until intrinsically something change in your value system that you prioritize something else in your life, but again, from a place of choice. So it's dangerous for the sustainability of our health behavior, like emphasizing moral superiority and obligation, actually reduce the sustainability of our health behavior. The other part of healthism that is extremely dangerous is when we make health an individual responsibility, we by default disregard the political and social component of health. The example I was giving earlier is with regards to this young man who now has a family and is building a house and is prioritizing his family. We disregard personal choices, but we also disregard the systemic issue related to, for an example, health accessibility, right? When, for an example, economical status, when someone lives under the poverty line and has to have two, sometimes three employment in order to make meets ends, how can they find time to go to the gym? Like it's physically impossible. All their energy is dedicated to earning enough money to bring food on the table, let alone finding any energy to move their body. Or accessibility to health in some country, US, for an example, health care access is private. You have to have a certain level of income to be able to access care. Another danger of healthism is when we put the responsibility on the individual, we disregard significant political decision. We did a podcast in November 2024, right after the election, where we looked at the potential consequence, the political consequence of Make America Healthy Again, that is associated with the new president of the United States and the danger of that from a political standpoint. I want to give you another example of that, that all of us probably listening to this podcast have lived through already. This is not like projection. This is things that we've already seen happen, but didn't realize was associated with healthism. So in the late mid 1980s, the under the Reagan era in the United States, there was this discovery that CFC releasing in the air were a danger to the ozone, right? It was established that the CFC coming from spray can, air conditioner, refrigerator were in part, in great part, the cause of the ozone degradation. The political narrative around the ozone degradation did not address the systemic issue, which by the manufacturer of the spray can or of the appliances, but instead, what went out to the public is the personal responsibility of the individual to protect themselves from skin cancer due to ozone degradation. That's how healthism plays out at the systemic level. Instead of the political power addressing the systemic issue with corporation, no, 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 no. We're going to actually put the responsibility on the individual to put lotion on to protect themselves from ozone degradation and skin cancer. When we think about healthism and we think about weight stigma in the medical system, right? We know that the individual responsibility with regards to your weight is a small proportion related to the individual, right? The whole narrative around social determinant of health. If you've never heard me talk about the social determinant of health, I'll put a link in the show note whereby we know that less than 20%, I believe that, I don't have the number right off my head, but less than 20% of an individual health is of an individual nature, where more than 80% of what contributes to one's health is not in their control. Social determinant of health, social economic status, access to care, gun law, motor laws, a whole bunch of stuff. So when we think about weight stigma, it's the same thing, right? The individual capacity to control their body is very little, but instead the social determinant have a much greater impact, yet we do not give access to people in larger body to healthcare in the same way as those in thin bodies. That's how healthism plays out in your life. I want to talk about what does that mean for you? Right? Now that you understand healthism better, what does that mean for you? You probably have internalized healthism in the same way that you've internalized fat phobia, meaning that you are not relying on other people pushing you to pursue health and to become obsessed with your health. You're doing that work for yourself. You're oppressing yourself. You're judging yourself for how much effort, how much investment you're putting towards your health. And if your health is not behaving in a way that you think it should, you are also criticizing yourself. Very often, what I hear from women is, I've caused this to myself, completely disregarding things like, genetics, right? And instead, playing out the internalized healthism and blaming themselves for things like diabetes, right? We know that diabetes, a huge component of diabetes is genetic. Yet the healthism narrative from wellness culture and diet culture has trained us to believe we are causing diabetes because we quote unquote ate too much sugar or we're too quote unquote heavy and we're causing diabetes. Yet scientifically, we know that one of the major components of diabetes is genetic, but that is being quote unquote tossed under the rug. And we don't need anybody to shame us. We're doing that to ourselves. we're taking the personal responsibility and we're creating this inner narrative in our head and the emotional load of healthism. So, what do we do? Well, just like we decondition our brain from internalized fat phobia, from the self critical, the self judgment we have oppressed ourselves with, we need to do the same thing with healthism. And one of the most effective way to do that is weight neutral approach to health, right? If you're like, well, that's me, go back and listen to podcast 420, the weight neutral approach to health, a paradigm shift, because that's the shift that needs to happen internally with you in order to decondition this healthism in yourself. So this is where my statement, there is more to life than good health. And I wanted to kind of illustrate that with you with a health condition that I've had present in my life since around 20 years old. I was diagnosed at around 20 years old with a scoliosis, two herniated discs in my lower spine, and stenosis, and a unbalanced pelvis causing muscle spasm. So the reason why I was diagnosed with that is that I started in my early 20s to have back muscle spasm, ended up in a hospital and got into an x-ray machine, and then they discovered the scoliosis. From the moment I got diagnosed with scoliosis, I was told, word for word, if you lose weight, the pain will be less. So that, in a way, my weight is causing the muscle spasm. Meanwhile, there is a great percentage of people with scoliosis that are in thin body with the same amount of pain as me, yet my weight was centered as the cause. So my scoliosis became tangled in to my pursuit of weight loss, and it became a layer of shame around my weight. I'm causing the pain. And as a result of that, I avoided complaining, seeking treatment, seeking support from the medical system for at least 10 years with my scoliosis because I could not control my weight, or I would lose weight and regain it right after. And then in my 30s, the pain became so severe that I had no choice but to seek support. And instead of seeking support within the traditional medical system, I decided to go down the route of chiropractor and osteopath. And I ended up investing large sum of money trying to control the pain in my back because I felt so ashamed of having that pain in my back because I believed I was causing it. And it became a self-worth, a self-image, a self-esteem pursuit to find the solution, not to be suffering, so that I could prove that I was working hard enough towards not having any pain. I mean, chiropractor, osteopath, supplement. I did all the alternative treatment available to remove the pain. I became a yoga teacher in hope that yoga would fix the pain. And I even went to a point where I was led to believe that I could, quote unquote, strengthen my spine if I worked hard enough with certain technique and therefore solve what I had caused. That's how healthism plays. I did not have any pleasure. Trust me. There was no enjoyment of my body during those years because I, quote unquote, hated my body for doing that to me. So, yeah, there is more to life than good health. There is more to life in my case than a straight spine. There is more to life. I gave an example in the last podcast, episode 420, with diabetes. I've had to coach women on this, unfortunately, too many times, where because of the narrative that wellness culture tells you that diabetes is controllable and you've caused it because of how much sugar you ate and your weight and all that bullshit stuff, women have come to say no to certain social activity because they don't want to be in face of certain food they shouldn't be eating. They don't want to be talking about what their health is and diabetes to their social network. Their people are becoming reclusive because of the shame they carry with regards to their health or the amount of effort they think they didn't do to control their health. So there is more to life than good health. And the irony of this is when we accept that there is more to life than good health, that our health is uncontrollable in most cases, and that we are not our health status, like our moral values, not our health status, that's when health promoting behavior become easier. Because they're no longer tangled in to our self-worth. They're from a place of choice, and they become consistent, they become more regular, they become lifelong habit that actually may or may not improve the said health condition. So I'm going to wrap us up with an exercise I want to propose to you to do. It's some journaling question from an author that some of you may know. Her name is Aubrey Gordon from the podcast Maintenance Phase and the author of the book Your Fat Friend and the blog Your Fat Friend. She wrote an article for South Magazine. I'm going to link it in the show note. And inside of it, she proposed 5 journaling questions for you to explore your social conditioning to health and perhaps your conditioning to healthism. I'm going to give you a sample of those questions here. Why do you want or why do you expect to be healthy? Why do you want or expect to know about other people's health? When you're discussing their health with those other people, are you assuming their level of knowledge, their level of effort towards their health? So these are just 2 questions. I want to spill the beans. I really want you to go and read the entire article because it can be profound for you to read Aubrey's take on healthism and then explore those questions. Let me know. Let me know how that goes for you. Reach out to me on Instagram. It'll be a pleasure for me to chat with you in the DM. With that in mind, my sister, I love you, and I'll see you on the next podcast. Hey, my sisters, if you are loving what you are learning on the podcast, you have to come and check out our feminist mentorship masterclasses and our internationally recognized non-diet coaching certification on our website at www.stephaniedote.com/shop. This is where you can get the individual coaching and the support to take the concept taught on the podcast to the next level. Embrace our well-being in a way that will expand our collective freedom and power. Come and join myself and other women to learn how to reshape your mind, not your body. I'll see you there.